The Audi A5 and S5 are all new here for 2025, and in this video I'm going to cover the differences and compare the A5 and the S5 back to back, as well as going over all the changes here for this new generation of the A5 and the S5. We'll talk about the exterior changes, the interior changes, take them both for a drive and see what they're like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of fuel economy you can expect, and also the pricing and how they compare to the competition. And so as far as the styling here on these, so it's on the new PPC platform here for these, so brand new platform, everything is completely new with these. And as you can see, the styling is also new, including the cool lift back that you now have for these, as they've combined the A4 model line with the A5 Sportback. And so now we just have the A5s here. And having that Sportback practicality is so nice. And combined with the growth of this vehicle, it's grown 2.6 inches for the wheelbase, 2.7 inches as far as the length overall. It's also 2 inches taller and also a half an inch wider. And because of those gains, we now have best-in-class rear legroom, best-in-class cargo space, and also some really nice looks as well, I have to say. And so as far as the styling here up front, they look really great. You can see here for the A5, we have, a more conservative, more mild look here for the front end, but it's still really nice with the illuminated Audi logos here and the nice grille you have. You also have these adjustable headlights that have 8 different themes. It also is paired up with adjustable OLED taillights here on the Prestige trims, and really nice to have that to, customize the lighting signature to whatever you prefer. And then out back, you're gonna see, again, you have that full width taillight bar, and you have the real exhaust tips on these now, which is also a very nice thing to have on these. And I think they're just, again, a really nice look for both of these. But let's go into the actual comparison back to back of the actual styling changes between the A5 and the S5. All right, so as far as the styling differences between the A5 and the S5 here. So as far as the A5, again, you see that smooth over nose. You still do actually have the aero curtains here though. Just a little bit of a less aggressive front bumper. Coming over to the S5 though, you can see that you do have the extra painted pieces there, which is great, and a little bit of a more aggressive front bumper. You do have the S badge there, which is nice. We're seeing on other S's that's been removed, so I'm really happy we have that differentiator. And you can see it's pretty much the same grille, just with this piece painted black, and it has the silver accents, but still just looks a lot nicer here. Headlights appear to be the same between the two. And you can see this also just looks a little sportier because the S5 is also 20 millimeters lower as standard for all of them compared to the A5. Another difference you can see here is that on the A5 there you have chrome window trim here, at least on these ones the way they're configured, and you have the black here on the S5, and of course sportier wheels here on this one, and you see the red brake calipers versus the still very nice wheels. And again, there's a variety of wheels to pick from, but you can see just the regular calipers there on those, which are smaller. I'll talk more about the differences in the brakes whenever we go out for a drive, but really nice with the black trim here, and again the nice Sportback shape looks really cool. And you also get a little integrated spoiler here that you don't get on the A5s, but a nice, large hatch opening. And you see the S5 badge, of course, and you got the quad exhaust tips here, sportier rear bumper, and that's about it as far as the changes. But here we'll look at the A5 to compare. Again, still real exhaust tips on this, which is great, and just, again, a little less aggression there. But I also still like, the A5 does have some little interesting patterns to the rear bumper there. And, both look really nice. So we got the Quattro badge there. And so yeah, I mean, again, really cool. You also have the flush door handles here, which is interesting. And there's no actual moving component. It's just a touch sensor, and you just give it a little bit of pressure, and that's how the doors open up. But that's another thing that makes these look a little more sleek here for this new generation. But yeah, so that's a nice little comparison. Some meaningful differences here on the outside, but also, again, not a huge change. But I think definitely looks great, especially the Ascari blue here on the S5 is a really great look. And so now I'm in the interior of the S5 here, but I'm going to talk again about the differences between the S5 and the A5 here. So as far as the interior in these new vehicles, well, again, you have more space, and the real big improvement, in addition to the extra legroom and cargo space, is there's more shoulder room as well. So they say this really feels almost like it's a class up as a result of that extra shoulder room. And so, I mean, a very impressive array of screens we have here. And anyway, they're getting into the basics here. So you have really great seats here. So in the S here, you have the sportier seats that does have the optional Bang & Olufsen stereo here in this top prestige version, which, by the way, is a really fantastic stereo. I also sampled this a lot in the SQ6 e-tron recently, and it's a 20 speaker 810 watt system, and it's really impressive with headrest speakers that not only really give you super immersive surround sound, but also allow you to have either phone calls or navigation instructions piped directly into just your headrest, and that allows you to be able to take a phone call without the speakers blaring your phone call to everyone outside the vehicle and hearing your phone call there, or again, not disturbing other people whenever you have navigation instructions while music's playing, for example. And so all that is, you know, really cool. But I mean, this stereo is arguably one of the best stereos I've ever experienced, honestly, and is just really, really well done. So that is absolutely worth the extra money you're going up for these higher trims if you do really, you know, enjoy a high quality music experience. But as far as the other things of these seats, well, one thing I'm really happy is that we have quilted attractive seats here in the S5, but thankfully they have ventilation. Some of the lower Audis, you know, don't get ventilation with quilted seats, but I'm so happy we have ventilation here in these prestige versions. The lower versions will have heated seats still, and you also, you know, have all the usual adjustments, but here in the S, they're also a massaging seat, which is really cool, and super comfortable, you know, has all the other usual adjustments, but really great seats here. The steering wheel is also really cool and also different here between the S and the A. So for the S, you have this flat top to it here, and a little bit of a sportier wheel with the perforation and all that, but the same buttons here in the middle. And I still love how Audi, you know, keeps this pretty nice and simple. You do have a few controls here on it, but I love that you still have the cruise control controls on a separate stalk. And so that makes this a lot less cluttered than a lot of the competitors that have to jam a million buttons onto the steering wheel. And also having the squared off top really gives you a better view of this gauge cluster. And moving on to the gauge cluster here, that's the first of this array of screens we have. It's an 11.9 inch screen here for the gauges, and it's pretty nice. You have a decent amount of adjustments here. I wish there was a little more customization, especially I'd like to see a little bit of a sportier vibe here for the S5 and maybe some more gauges and stuff. But, you know, it has all the basics nonetheless, and still is, you know, giving you all the stuff you really need. And I do really like how it's an OLED display. All of these displays are OLED, and so that means at night you are going to have a better experience versus some of the regular screens that are going to be blaring, you know, this like dark gray light at you at all times. At nighttime, you're just going to have, you know, those black portions be turned off, and so less glare on your face as a result. And so I really love that. You also have a new head-up display here in these top prestige versions, and that's really impressive because it's 85% larger for the viewing space. You also can now have more controls built into the head-up display itself, so you can actually make adjustments as far as your radio just directly through the little menu you have in the head-up display, as well as placing a phone call. And you also have this dynamic interaction light here on the top on these top versions as well, and that's going to just basically reflect your turn signal, but also can do a few other things where it interacts with like the voice assistant, and just a nice little fun extra touch there as well. And then coming over to the middle here for the 14.9 inch touchscreen, I really like that it has some, you know, design to it. It's not just a rectangular tablet like we see with many others these days, and it is again a nice really high resolution OLED display. And I actually really love the way they do the software here with this newest Audi system. I love how you have all the basic menu icons there on the left that are always ever present. You always have an ever present row of climate controls here, and you do thankfully have wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto here, and that, you know, will populate the other part of the screen. But, you know, it's nice you still have the baked in Audi stuff to go along with that here. So, you know, doing all the usual stuff is great. You also do have, you know, the great navigation maps here with the satellite imagery from Google. It also has Google built in, so you have Google Play Store. You also have various themes you can download from Audi and customize that, which is a really fun little touch. And doing all the other usual stuff, Sirius satellite radio, all those types of things, nice and easy, and a really well done screen. You also have the option for a 10.9-inch passenger display, and that basically reflects everything that the driver's display here in the middle can do. So same thing, you can load up navigation instructions there, change radio stations, do all that stuff just built into that screen itself. And that is an intelligent screen, so it will have active shutters. So if the passenger is like watching YouTube or playing a game, which are the other things you can do on that screen, then you won't be able to see that stuff as the driver. But then, if it's something the driver could, have as an assistance, like the maps or something, you can, have that on there. And it also depends on whether the car is moving and, a variety of other factors. But, really nice passenger display. And again, living with the SQ6 e-tron for a week that had that display, my wife actually really appreciated having that. Moving on beyond the screens here, we have this nice large storage bin that I really like because it's angled pretty aggressively, so it will actually do reliable wireless charging with that wireless charging pad you have here. You also have the 2 USB-C jacks and a regular power outlet in there, and a few buttons here for your gear selector and for your drive mode selector, and some nice large cup holders and pockets in the doors here. I also really appreciate here for the S in particular, you have this textured carbon fiber that you can feel. I don't think it's actually real carbon, but it's kind of, just that kind of look to it, and that's really nice. Now, going back into the A5, you'll see that that's just going to be, kind of a smooth plastic and really nice. You do have some padding lower down, but the other thing I will say is I wish that you had padding higher up, because resting my knee here, if I'm doing adaptive cruise control, for example, my knee is resting on the hard stuff, not on the soft padding that's lower. That might, be different depending on your driving position, but for me, the padding is just completely wasted on me because it's not padding anything. It looks nice and feels nice when you're poking around, but isn't actually, giving you any real padding there. Now, you also do have a little center armrest here that does have some storage underneath that as well. And the other thing before we head into the back is the moonroof here, which is really cool. So it's just a glass roof. It does not open up, but it has this really cool adjustment where you can have it tinted on demand, and it's just able to, with the normal control like you'd have for a regular moonroof button, you have it so that you can shade the front half, the back half, the whole thing. And then moving on to the back seat here, again, best in class rear legroom here, and it's a nice amount of space. And the seat does do this power adjustment thing all the time, so I'm not able to say exactly what it's like with me sitting behind myself, but what I can say is that, again, it's plenty of space even with it doing the auto recline thing there. And you also will see that they have their own USB-C jacks, their own air vents back there, a fold down center armrest, pockets in those doors, and also a good amount of headroom as well. That's another thing they improved. Headroom was a little tight on the last generation of the S5 Sportback and A5 Sportback as well. And so the fact that you have a little bit better headroom, thanks to this again being 2 inches taller than the old one, is certainly a nice livability improvement. So if you are worried about, you're coming out of an A4 and you're worried about, the Sportback thing with your rear headroom, just know that this does accommodate very tall people very well still. Now, the last thing is the cargo space. Again, best in class, and again, just a massive amount of space thanks to that nice large hatch. It's nice and wide, nice and long. There's not really anything under the floor there, but, just a really good amount of space. Again, best in class. You can't ask for more, and it really makes you question, do you need to go up to that SUV? A lot of people, feel like you need to for the extra cargo space, and certainly, a Q5 is going to give you better stacking ability than this will, thanks to its, more square shape. But, I think for majority of people, if they're honest with themselves, you're not stacking your cargo to the roof hardly ever, if at all. And so I think you can go for the sedan again and go for, the cooler styling here and not have to go up to an SUV. And I love that they've done this. And especially, you drop those rear seats, and I mean, you can fit, a bike back there, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's really, really, an excellent innovation. I think we're going to see a lot of other companies follow suit because it just makes a lot of sense. And I also like, the last little thing I'll say is the differences between the trim here in S5 versus A5. So in the S5, you have this nice dark chrome kind of finish. It's actually, cool to the touch. metal here, versus A5 you have the bright work instead. And you know, even other thing on the doors here you see is that you have also, you know, all your controls for your mirrors and all that in this little control panel, as well as your memory seats. So we're starting off here in the A5, and we'll step up to the S5 here in a few minutes, but we're starting out here on a fantastic winding canyon road here. Unfortunately, we're stuck behind some traffic, but again, this is only the A5, so we'll save the crazy driving for the S5 version. But as far as the A5, you know, it's really nice and comfortable for the ride quality. I think part of the reason why is because of that stretched wheelbase, again, being about 2.5 inches longer. You know, that's going to give you a more stable base and just allow you to just have everything be a little more spread out. The extra width of this vehicle, you know, everything just, again, feels really nice and stable. And you know, it's been a few years since I've been in the S5 Sportback of the last generation, so I'm not going to be able to do a perfect comparison of the gains compared to the prior generation here. But I can just say it's really nice and smooth, really nice and quiet. And another thing that's also universal to all of these A5 and S5s is the new steering rack. It's a progressive steering rack. It's a lot more direct feeling, and that's one thing they really focused on a lot, was steering feel. And you know, it does feel really good. Again, I'd have to drive them both back to back to say how it improved over the old one, but it does feel very good, and I have no complaints with the steering as a result. Otherwise though, the engine here, you just still have a 2-liter turbo, but it's now a variable vane turbo. That's also a change they made for both this and the S5. And so here with the 4-cylinder, it's really smooth. I think that's the real standout feature, is just the smoothness of the power delivery. And also, I have to say that we were doing a little bit of around town driving a few minutes ago, and with the 7-speed dual clutch that this has, which you might think would be an odd choice for the non-S version, you know, maybe they should have gone for a torque converter here for the regular A5, just because of, you know, the smooth factor you get with the torque converter. But I have no complaints with that either so far. We're going to spend a lot of time in this here over the course of the day, and the S5, so I'll be able to, you know, judge this transmission a little bit more once we're in the S5 later. But you know, again, I'm just really impressed with these modern dual clutches, especially from Volkswagen Group here. It's really, you know, very smooth. There's no jitteriness. There's no feeling like the clutch is engaging or disengaging. It's all really nice and smooth here. And by the way, it is also a 7-speed dual clutch, so I also like that there's not a ton of gear hunting, you know, like a lot of other transmissions these days, you know, 8, 10 speeds, whatever it is. The fact we only have 7, I think, is actually kind of refreshing and almost old school. It's kind of crazy to say, but it almost feels a little old school to have that few gears. But because of the nice torque of this engine, you know, you don't need to be gear hunting, especially again up here in the canyon, slowing down for traffic and then speeding up in the corners and everything. You know, it's just really leaning on that turbo and feels really nice. All right, so we went ahead and put it up into the dynamic mode here, and I'm gonna do a little acceleration and see how it does. And here we go. Okay, very slow to kick up, and then now we're going. Okay, and nice strong acceleration here. So again, 2-liter turbo 4, and it does a total of 295 pound-feet of torque, 268 horsepower. And so 0 to 60 for these is going to be, you know, right in line with kind of what we saw with the prior generation. You know, you don't really have, you know, much of a gain as far as, you know, horsepower. It's, you know, just a few compared to the last generation here. But, you know, for the A5, again, you're not focused on performance, so I'm not going to harp on that. But what I can say, you know, because we do have some more corners here going around. And one other thing you do get as standard is you get a rear bias for the roll stabilization, the way they set up the suspension here. They also said this new steering rack also moves the weight bias ever so slightly more rearward than in the last generation. And you also get brake-based torque vectoring now for these as well. And so, again, that's something that even A5 gets. You don't have to go up to the S5 to get that. And so, you know, just pushing it a little bit here. You know, it's really flat, feels really good, and of course you get all-wheel drive as standard here in America for the Audis, and so that means that you have, you know, just a really nice, stable kind of power delivery, of course, that sure-footed feeling that, you know, everyone loves about Audi all-wheel drive, the Quattro all-wheel drive system here. And another thing, too, that, you know, might make you not even want to go up to the S5 is the fact that you have the same tire width, really, here, especially when you go to these optional wheels. They're 245 wide, regardless of whether you're in the A5 or the S5, although the S5 does give you the option for summer tires. You only have all seasons available here for the A5s, but that's obviously a nice easy swap if you do want to have more grip in your A5. Everything has a nice level of glaze over top of it as far as the powertrain goes, while steering is still really nice and sharp and doesn't, it kind of gives you more feedback than it did in the past, a little less glaze maybe than the last generation. And so now we're out on the highway in the A5, and this is a little bit of a rougher highway, I'd say, here in Colorado, so probably not the best reflection of what road noise will be like on the highway, but it's still a really nice cruiser. I also do have the adaptive cruise control system on, which does come standard here on all of these A5s and S5s. Now the adaptive cruise assist is something you get on Premium Plus and Prestige, and that's going to give you just a little bit more, the lane keep assist, I believe. But otherwise, all the other safety stuff comes standard here on A5. So you have blind spot monitoring, you have the auto front emergency braking, the assist, so it'll even intervene as far as swerving or stopping if it detects any forward cross traffic, and also rear cross traffic alert and auto braking. It does all of that as standard, and that's notable because most of the other German competitors especially will make you still buy an extra multiple $1,000 package in order to get all of that safety tech, and Audi makes it standard here, again, aside from a couple of these tiny little convenience things, and that's really commendable, that they're not going to charge you extra and package that stuff out. And so it just makes it nice and easy too from a buying standpoint. At the dealer there, you just go for any of these and you're going to have all your bases covered there, which is great. On Prestige, you also get acoustic glass for the front windows, and so that also helps to quiet things down a little bit as well if you go for these top ones. But yeah, no complaints here. It's doing a really good job also, letting it do most of the steering here for me. It's not ping-ponging or anything. I mean, this is a pretty straight highway. Once I get one of these back at home in Pittsburgh to test on my windy highways, we will see, how the lane keep assist does there. But here, it's doing a really good job. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and go into the S5 now and see how that accelerates, how that handles on some more great twisty roads. All right, so we're in the S5 now. I'm going to start straight away here with an acceleration, and let's see how the S5 accelerates. And here we go. Again, there's that lag. I don't love that. And then it does kick in very nicely and gets up and goes really well. So for the S5 here, we lean on the brakes as people are pulling out here now. It's a really strong performer. So for the S5, you have the 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine, and it's a variable vane turbo for this as well, just like in the A5, but of course a unique turbo here for the S5, and it's extra cylinders, of course. And so it gives you 362 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque, which is actually best in class torque, they say, as well. So a really good amount of punch here. It'll do about a 4.3 seconds 0 to 60 time, and by the way, that's about 13 more horsepower and I think about 36 more pound-feet of torque than what you got on the last S5 Sportback. And so it's a nice improvement for sure, and it's great that we still have the V6 because we see, for example, with AMG with the C43 going to a 4-cylinder hybridized turbo. And so for the traditionalists that are happy that this motor has stuck around and evolved as well, that's really, really great. And so otherwise here, the S5 also has, like I mentioned in the beginning, 20 millimeter lower suspension, and you also have, the adaptive dampers that are available here on this. And they say that the drive modes also have a greater variability between the modes, and so we'll try that out here. But we're currently in dynamic mode, but like comfort mode will be softer than the last generation, and dynamic will be stiffer and sportier than the last generation. So, really emphasizing those modes more than before. All right, so now we are back on a nice windy road with no traffic. We were stuck in traffic for hours due to an accident, which is why the clear change of scenery and lighting and me suddenly wearing a jacket here. So now we are though in these beautiful mountain roads, and got a lot of impressions of how this feels in traffic, crawling, but now we can finally open up the S5 here and see what it can do a little bit. And so the real cool thing is, again, with the S5 you do have adaptive dampers here, and again the drive modes are really widely spaced out now, more than they were before. So you have a stiffer dynamic mode, but honestly, even though this road actually does have a fair amount of bumps and stuff, you feel it a little bit, but I think it's still very much luxury car appropriate, and it doesn't feel unrefined or anything. And again, all it takes is switching it up there with the drive modes, and then you can have it as soft as you'd like. But other things here though, I have noticed during the longer amount of driving that we've been doing that there is a significant delay with the throttle, and we got a straightaway here, so I'll actually just demonstrate once again. If you just even roll on and it's 1, 2, 3, then it's going. And I noticed this multiple times. My co-driver noticed this. This isn't just us. It's not just this car. I don't think it's just the way they have programmed this vehicle to respond. And I don't know if it's a hypermiling technique of trying to resist aggressive throttle inputs, or what it is to, get better fuel economy or something. I don't know. But, in dynamic mode here, it should always be instant. And I mean, when you kick down, eventually it does, have good responses, and sometimes it's better than others, but a lot of times, especially low RPMs, you really catch it off guard. But I'm going to try out some manual shifts here, so we haven't done that. Again, 7-speed S-tronic dual clutch automatic here, and let's see how this does. Here we go. Even that, kind of slow. It makes me wonder if it's the new turbo, and that's a little warning message that it's given me there. That's just a glitch for these cars being very early production. But anyway, I mean, it's nice and quick with the responses. I wasn't expecting it to be slow or anything. Yeah, I'm starting to think, because even there, so I was holding this gear and I just felt a while before the turbo kicked in. So I don't know if maybe there's just a high boost threshold or actual turbo lag here going on or what, but that's really my only dynamic criticism I can say, because otherwise, so on this road now, getting a little tighter, a little bit bumpier here, really good driving here though now, and beautiful scenery, but this feels great. It does feel really good, and once you are in the upper RPMs and you got things moving in the right direction here, then it really does feel great.
Wow, and the brakes were great too.
Brakes were great. We have some Ram here.
Wow.
Trademark. And this is my co-driver, by the way, Michael Frank here, who's joining us. Yeah, so anyway, while we're on the topic of brakes, the brakes are also very good. We have front rotors that are 0.9 inches larger than the regular A5. They're 0.8 inches larger in the rear. I think they're 14.2 inch rotors in the front. I think it's about 13.8 or so in the rear. Interestingly though, they're only single piston calipers, so we don't have any kind of crazy caliper setup. I mean, they're large, as you can see there, but just not anything crazy overboard. Hopefully someday we will get another RS5 with some proper intense brakes and even more performance, hopefully, because the old RS5 was fantastic. So we'll see about that, but in the meantime, I mean, yeah, brakes work very good there for us, and it also helps that we do have the summer tires here once again on the S5, and so that's going to give you some nice grip here, even though they are only 245 wide, and that's again an easy thing to upgrade though if you'd like to some wider tires. But it's kind of surprising they don't offer wider or maybe like a competition setup. Maybe again that's safe for RS5 eventually too, but these roads here are a little bit more of a higher speed sweeper kind of situation, so not able to really approach the limits of grip here. But this also feels really nice and fairly light by modern standards as well. These weigh 4,288 pounds, and for anyone curious that's cross-shopping between A5 and S5, you do have about a 200-pound weight penalty going up to the S5 here compared to the A5. So, but 200 pounds for, the V6 over the 4-cylinder and all the other hardware, isn't bad in my opinion. You also get a sport rear diff, and it's a mechanical diff. It's not an actual limited slip diff, and they say this allows it to drive torque to the individual wheels a little bit better, and that's why they selected that. Again, I'm sure with some more demanding scenarios for traction, you'll really allow that to shine. We do have one tight little hairpin, so I'm just going to try out this diff a little bit, see if I can get any kind of rotation here. Okay, I felt a little rotation, but I was held back by that throttle lag again. I don't like that. And I mean, we even, before, whenever we weren't even trying to drive sporty, just trying to pull out in traffic, it can actually be like a safety concern, because there's a time where okay, 1, 2, 3, okay, now we're finally getting out of people's way. Just that's just not acceptable. I hope they do some kind of, recall or update or something to fix that quickly, because it's way too delayed. All right, I'm going to try a launch control here. I'm going to do ESC off is usually the way to do this in Audis. Then you just do both feet, and there we go.
That actually worked.
Yeah. And yeah, nice and pretty responsive, pretty punchy, and feels good. It's fun to get the clutch stump because, with other torque converter stuff, it's just a little bit smoother. So this, yeah, nice and, a nice big kick in the back like you like with a launch. And yeah, so I mean, that's about it as far as what I can judge here. Again, drove this plenty today, but it does feel, I'd say, just like I said earlier with the A5, just more planted, more stable because of the wheelbase, the width. I mean, everything just feels, proper next generation with the platform, proper step up in refinement. It's been very quiet. I mean, a lot of these roads are rough, and it's been, great with all of that. So the last couple of things here to mention are going to be the fuel economy averages for this and the A5, as well as the pricing of these two and how they compare to the competition. So fuel economy for the A5 is 22 mpg city, 31 highway, and 26 combined. The S5 drops that down to 19 mpg city, 28 highway, and 22 combined. In the case of the S5 especially, I'd say that's pretty good for a turbo V6 with over 400 pound-feet of torque, and with how the transmission is tuned, I wouldn't be surprised if these actually overperform those ratings. But stay tuned and subscribe for my real-world fuel economy once I have one of these for a week. Lastly, let's talk about pricing and how these compare to the competition. So the A5 starts at $51,000 including destination, and the Prestige trim that we are driving costs $58,840 as tested. Moving up to the S5 will require $64,000 to start, and the Prestiges we were driving were $73,345. But if you're looking to get the best deal possible on one of these, you're definitely going to want to head over to maranmotoring.com and click on the new car quotes tab. There you'll be able to get access to dealer invoice pricing, as well as getting connected to a dealer near you, where you can check one of these out in person for yourself and see what you think about the A5 and the S5. So there's going to be a link in the description, as well as one in a pinned comment to take you straight to that site and get you all that info. But now let's talk about how these compare to the competition. The closest competitor is the BMW 4 Series Gran Coupe, because it's the only one that offers the liftback versatility outside of the A5 and the S5. But if you equipped it with all the safety tech that comes standard on the A5, the BMW requires a premium package that then pushes the price up to be about $5,000 higher to start, and that's for the X-Drive version, again comparable to the Audi Quattro. BMW does offer it with rear-wheel drive though for a $2,000 savings if you live in a place where you don't need Audi's all-wheel drive system. When you go up to the loaded M440i version, it also ends up being about $3,000 more than the Audi, making the Audi the clear liftback value winner. Moving on to the non-liftback competitors, the Mercedes C-Class is the other primary one. And in this case, the A5 undercuts it even more, with C-Classes starting $3,500 more expensive, and the 4-cylinder AMG version still costing $3,000 more than the V6-powered S5. Another easy win for the Audi there. But if you're willing to look beyond the Germans, there are a few others that are even better values by a long shot. The strongest value is the old but very reliable Lexus IS, which is smaller and less practical, but it does start $7,500 less at $43,500. But at the top end, you can get the amazing 472 horsepower, naturally aspirated, glorious sounding V8 in the IS 500 for just $65,000 fully loaded, or about $8,500 less than the S5, again, with that one being fully loaded. And another dated but slightly smaller car that's also a very good value is the Genesis G70, which starts $5,000 less than the A5, gives you 300 horsepower as well from a 2.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder, and even going up to the twin-turbo V6 version only runs you $59,000 fully loaded, which is $14,000 less than the S5. The Cadillac CT5 is another strong competitor that's a little closer in space to the A5 and starts at about the same price as well. So not as much of a value, but it does give you the option for actual hands-free highway driving with Super Cruise, which is very nice if you do a lot of highway driving. And if you're interested in performance, the V version is only $67,600 fully loaded, which makes that $6,000 less than the S5 as well. Lastly, there's the Acura TLX, which actually starts $500 higher than the A5, making that one a worse value. But when you go up to the Type S version with its turbocharged V6, it's only $60,000 fully loaded. Again, over $13,000 less than the S5. And especially with some of those older competitors, you're probably going to be getting bigger discounts, making those price differences even bigger. But of course, your deal will always vary. So, I have to judge these by MSRP, but even at MSRP, there's some clear winners here, especially when you're talking about the performance stuff. But as you can see, the Audis are really well priced compared to their usual competitors. But if you don't need that European prestige, the others are a much better value if you're looking for a premium experience and don't need the liftback practicality. And a lot of those performance variants of those others that I mentioned were really, really fun and fantastic vehicles. So there are some very stiff competitors here in my opinion. But regardless, I really like the A5 and the S5. And aside from that acceleration delay, I think it's a really well done car. For Audi fans, especially if you're coming out of an older Audi, I think these new ones are definitely worth upgrading to if you value practicality, more refinement, more space, and more technology. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2025 Audi A5 and S5. Let me know your thoughts on them in the comments below. Big thanks to Audi for providing me with these vehicles and this opportunity to review them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.